Anti-radiation missiles being added to War Thunder might be one of the most controversial additions that Gaijin might decide to actually do or not. Why is that? Well, I mean, it's kind of obvious, right? Cass is already pretty powerful. Imagine adding a specific weapon that could target raiders that usually try to protect the ground targets in a ground battle with the AA systems, right? So that would be a pretty significant change in the way that the rock, paper, scissors kind of dynamic of a game such as War Thunder actually have in a ground battle, right? But at the same time, anti-radiation missiles are very important in the current modern day and throughout history since the 60s in a normal air combat, right? Air and ground combat, right? In a normal war environment. So let's take a look on some of the performances that you should expect from the early missiles to see that although initially, at least, these missiles wouldn't be too OP. Eventually, they might actually become, and actually try to see what are the BRs that you will see these missiles. So we start off with the oldest missile, AGM-45 Shrike. This would be the first missile to be deployed basically in service for the US, and it had a very limited performance. It was basically a Sparrow with a very different, not that different actually, but a different seeker that would target, depending on what the variant was, different raiders on the ground. The main idea here was to actually obviously try to destroy sites that hold the S-75 launcher in the Vietnam War, right? And it saw some limited success. Around 25% of them hit it, apparently. And of course, it wasn't a very big missile, so it didn't do a lot of damage. And even when it did, I mean, it would just basically destroy the antenna, which was considered a very easy to replace, part of a radar anti-air site, right? Remember that these sites, they're not a singular vehicle like we have in the game. They are very large sites that you have to destroy multiple radars and multiple launchers to be able to do something about them, right? It was a very low range. Initially it was like 16 kilometers, but normally it was even lower than that. 4, 5, 6 kilometers launches were done a lot of times, and it was something that would mean that you would need to get into the ranges of these AA systems. And of course, it was also not that precise. So it would go very close to the radar, but sometimes it would just not hit properly, right? Or hit around the area. So initially, we could see these missiles in a BR that it goes throughout many types of tanks over here. So for example, an F4E type of aircraft could take this, so 11 point something. An F-105 with a 10.0 could take these BRs, these missiles, so it will be semi-high tier, not top tier of tanks, but definitely high up there. And, in these BRs, we have plenty of very good AA systems, many nations have radar AA systems at these BRs like the Tunguska and stuff that are pretty good, right? So the Shrikes, they will not be that effective. Of course, they would have upgrades done to it, but it would be a missile that it would be easily fooled. For example, if you just turn it off the radar, and even with the radar on, the missile might actually miss, right? So the Shrikes, they could actually be added to the game right now without too much of a problem. Initially, even the KH-25MP, another missile that was made by the Russians, the initial variant, also had these types of problems. It would be a missile that wouldn't be that precise. I mean, they say that, the Russians say that it would be more precise than, something like the Shrike, but of course he entered in servers later, if I'm not mistaken as well, right? So it's a different type of technology, but still, it would be a very early missile that would mean that these wouldn't actually be able to continue the guidance basically after the radar is off, for example, stuff like that, right? So these are missiles that it would actually be okay to have it in the game. But then we have the next generation of missile, for example, the AGM-78 Standard ARM, right? This is probably one of the most used missiles in the terms of anti-radiation missiles, right? It was used in the same types of aircraft since the Vietnam era, and of course even later with the A6E and other aircraft, but it was mainly used on the Vietnam era. And yeah, this would be a completely different missile, just like an upgrade for the KH-25MP, which basically added inertial navigation system for that missile. The arm could actually go to the same place that it last knew that the radar was, even if the radar was off, right? It means what? It means that the KH-25MP with the upgraded internals and the AGM-78 would be the first missiles to actually be able to hit a target like a site that was not movable, right? In the game, of course, if these missiles are added, they wouldn't be too OP because, of course, if you keep moving it, turning it off the radar, turning it on, it would actually create a pretty interesting dynamic. And AA systems that would get killed by these types of missiles would only be ones that are basically not paying attention, not being smart about how they drive their AA system, right? Because they need to keep moving, turn it on the radar, turn it off. It would be a little bit more difficult, but it is doable, and it would actually have an interesting dynamic. But still, guys, the controversy is still there, with the Shrike, with the initial KH-25s, it would actually be okay to have these missiles because they were not that good, right? But with the AGM-78, we start to have a pretty significant idea here that these missiles are going to be pretty good. They have a pretty good range. You can just fire them and keep the AA busy and actually try to bomb them doing something else, So it creates a whole bunch of problems that I don't know if the game is ready for this missile. And I really wanted to ask you about it, right? It's controversial, but I honestly think that the majority of the players, especially in ground battles, will kind of agree that we don't need seed or anti-radiation missiles because of that, right? But I wanted to know what is your opinion on it, because honestly I think it's necessary for these types of weapons to be added to the game, but at the same time maybe the game is not ready yet for this type of thing, right? Maybe it is something that it's not gonna be too OP. We don't know yet. That's why I think Gaijin doing the test that they are probably going to do very soon, that was data mined, is very important, because we need to know how seed, how anti-radiation missiles, something like that, even though it was not data mined, that there was anti-radiation missiles there, but we need to have some form of test to see in a ground battle if these missiles could actually be added, or if it's just something that needs to be added for air battles to have something else to do in a match, right? Different aircraft, etc., right? So we really need to know. So let me know in the comments what you think about these missiles. Do you think the performance of them will be too OP, too weak? Do you think just remove all aircraft from ground battles? Let me know in the comments, and I see you guys on the next one. Okay, yeah, subscribe, leave a like, leave a comment, and bye. See ya.